time is a transverse section of forever. Literally. So, a transverse, if you take a biology class, a transverse section of a tomato, which means you'll cut not just a slice, a thin slice of it. I guess that would be a transverse section also, a slice of a tomato. But they cut a thin slice so you could see through it with the microscope. Because a tomato, it's almost see-through, so it allows you to observe the parts of the cell, like the cell nucleus, the cell body, the cell wall, which are not as defined as they are on paper when they draw it and stuff, but that's what is manifest. There are multiple identities sharing an identity. And they share a semi-nature relationship simultaneously to the complete fruit. And that complete fruit shares a semi-nature relationship to that complete flower. That complete plant. The tomato plant. And there are 3 parts of forever. And there are 3 parts of time. If you want to get technical, there are 1/3/5 parts. Manifest, where and how one identity of volume is making more and more of itself as forever nature. As that identity of volume that generated physics, metaphysics, and identity semi-nature relationship to and as itself. One identity of volume is juxtaposed with and as all others. It is the only volume that is completely singular as an identity of volume. And where and how that is not true is where and how it is making more identity as temporary / lasting value nature. Where temporary is making more and more forever nature as identity. Identity is nature where it is with positive and negative simultaneously. Where temporary forever nature is making more and more lasting positive or negative relationship to itself and to ourself, yourself, each individually grouped in together. Grouped ages, areas, sexes. See, when you look at things and use correlation without criminally foreign influences and with no physical delusions, things that appear to make us, in other words, we're supposed to be able to correlate about the invisible but still discernible. See, but in other words, it's one thing to say you're about inclusion, but pretending pretending not to realize that those inclusion narratives are playing out the trap that was set as the pathology for what they're going to build, that was involved with slavery of our founding parents. That was sickly distinct. It wasn't bad. It was sickly distinct from. We have internation identities, lawsuits, and ties, and encounters that can't defend themselves in their treatments of positive and negative of sciences that are abridged as victims, and counter what exploits that at the same time. So what is manifest as the identities of nations, as the identities of industries, as the identities of the companies of industries, as the identities of locations of the companies and industries. All locations, areas, and states were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures with nature in demonstrating that increasingly. And demonstration of its loss, of us following its native system. See, the rest of the space nature has no criminal foreign influences. The rest of Earth's distinct and non-distinct relationship to the rest of space nature. The more and more we entertain criminal influences being and having been since semi-ancient times, since before modern religions, thank God, it's bad. But thank God it's good. In other words, you have to find with the good is not make positive out of negative, to see where there's temporary positive, to understand where and how temporary positive's complete identity will only stay positive unto itself, or it will push itself from here. It will push Earth's distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous difference in relationship to the rest of the space from here. Our difference is our identity of value progression, and the value of that bound distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, where we are this identity of volume / S as its. See, we're supposed to see this. We're supposed to discern this. The ancients talked about what is invisible but still discernible, such as the subject and such as the predicate are. Invisible but discernible identities of value / value progression, where nature is value / value as nature simultaneously. And that is a simultaneous nature where it is a sequenced nature. That's why there's two natures at once. And we could observe this using science. But it requires a quality of fact treatment nature that is offensively prevented. And see now, the same thing, so this kept interbreeding like witch trials. Then they have roles with that. Then they have to hide from hurt and value hurt, real or made up. Reactions to their responses as judges, where they have witch trials. Reactions to that now. They leave out the predicate acts delivery system method, the breaching method. And they talk anyway. Because everyone was a victim of tactically, sickly distinctly, tactically, criminally foreign influence sciences. Database relationships further. Branches further. All identity ground locations, formalized identity of the law locations only capable of valuing and having means to hide lie progressions. Right back to all identity of the ground locations. Increasingly valued, having been spoken about, having been fact treatment nature responded to, where and how we have great and bad. See, it was all inverted to roles with this method that knew, with those crazy, crazy laws. They were making standing criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and of negative treatments simultaneously, of identity treatments. It is one thing clear as day. It was identity thefts and frauds. Now that is responsible for ongoing. People say, "Oh, where was that?" This was responsible for every location's impositions, let alone our most forsaken, which are increasingly of value, positive or negative. They're increasingly of positive, but not where they have that inverted conversations through value nature systems, tactical ulterior from the one tied as nature to our words like value progression. They have all physical wealth, where job, where every value / value program, where people are going to walk go. Every identity of the ground location as victims, knowing everyone was going to have to seek positive anyway. And this was sophistication beyond what any kind of a unity could form to counter. It had to stay criminal insidiousness layers short. Even our founding parents, they had to hide their roles. They had to stay pretending other things and others, other phenomena led, natural emotions and natural, virtues led to the American Revolution. When it was in other words, they couldn't speak for what had entrenched slavery sickly distinctly north and south against everyone. Now, partial speaking against that was still completely fact, cheap in nature, possession by it. This is a breaching method that did that like a nervous system. If someone would try to change other, which everyone wanted and needed, it would call out. These people trying to change other. And then they would hurt people more and more. Then those people would blame those people who other more and more. Everyone would become knave, fact, cheap in nature, KNAVE, like grotesquely vile, fact, cheap in nature, as victims in response. This is only let fathomed. So time is bound. I'll gather round. Boxings. There are proofs that the ancients revealed boxing in the martial arts, specifically to maintain, contained, criminally foreign influenced uses of aggression and of fake care in relationship to that which they could exploit that is natural with each age of fact cheap in nature's weaknesses. But the way they were originally criminally foreign influenced uses of ground were nothing like, and they couldn't fathom that semi-ancients, that latter semi-ancients would forget how to cause evolution's fruits and gifts, by being positive onto the identity that is two identities of sequence, one identity of sequence nature, more finite than zero, while it is greater than infinity. While the phenomenon of infinity is manifest, where and how more and more forever nature is making more and more of itself. Where and how it divided its one volume. Well, it's one identity. It's one identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that are increasing simultaneously. And that's increasing from inside itself. We are inside an identity that is bigger than right to left will ever get, no matter how big space nature gets. And it is bigger than left to right, no matter how big space nature gets. It is lower than low, and it is higher than high. And everything is in demonstration of this one identity of value/value progression. All exceptions in exception nature are in demonstration of it. Correlation nature looks at Trinity, at buildings in New York City, for example, where there are people stacking. Not because there's no space in what they played out. You know, see, we're gonna the same way a computer works. There's only so much space that they could engineer to make affordable with a CPU. Then they have to have temporary locations, temporary memory. See, when the computer turns off, the CPU part of it keeps it memory, but then everything else gets lost. In other words, but what you can mimic, but what you could do by when there's temporary positive there, you can mimic what is simultaneous by making a whole bunch of like say carbon or whatever it is, element that they can make temporary positive while the current is still going through the computer, the circuit board or whatever. They have now more millions of locations. Now locations are used because then they can put the pieces of what has to be thought about, or what has to be counted, and or what has to be sorted. And they can bring it through the steps of logic, what they're going to do with things, vaccines. But this is leaving out correlation nature simultaneously inherent, active, and progressive means, which is more finite than three identities of zero and greater than infinity. And it is working with identity in ways that people working with the words / values like identity with all parts of computers, they can't afford to, for time reasons and things like that, to not separate subjects and leave out that which is inseparable from all subjects. And that's all right. But simultaneously, no one realized how that is being and having been exploited. With has nothing to do with that. It's uses of each identity of the ground location. This new. So think about that. They go back from the witch trials, the interbranch, the police forms of the time. They go back from the Jim Crow decisions, the police forms of the time, the counters to them. All rays that left out simultaneously what is actually where they left out the predicate X delivery system method from their subjects. Not only did they leave that out, all the fake sides we hear through history, they have recorded self-value, tactically, criminally, foreign influence premises treatments, sequence treatments, active progressive treatments, identity treatments. This is no joke. This is where and how individual grouped in together species identity of volume of the other species. We are a semi-nature relationship. Like the identities inside our body, individually grouped in together, they are a semi-nature relationship to your identity. And that identity is a semi-nature relationship to what revealed humanity. It's all right to have theory, but theory used to block the short words of people increasingly blocks the active and progressive words. They have people who complain about things online and then they take down posts that is involved with the extortion method that maintains each branch of government, every single identity, hundreds, countless people, individually grouped and together. You need to hide lipoaggressions. You need to hide actual uses of those identity ground locations, which are those identity ground locations, actual uses of all other locations in people's names and sequence treatments and identities and identity ground locations. That's what they're talking about in courts every day. In many pray. That's what they're talking about. They leave out how they have topics treatments, how they have subjects, they have the Constitution's value / value progression connected to all abridged identity ground locations and sciences, pretending they don't realize that. It's one thing to be about science, be a science, but pretend not to realize that it's a bridge science. They have a perfect world, maintain self-value. We have to counter where a fact, cheaping nature incompetence is hundreds of nations at once. So that's self-values when they're hurting each other, when they hate it. It's simultaneously self-valuing. that which it is maintained this way only capable of being. Uses of their identity they can't defend and counter what actually keeps the overt criminal enterprises, private criminal enterprises, and all database relationships tied stewards. Needed to hide the same lie progressions together. Needed to hide the same finite sequence shifts, finite active progressive lies, identity thefts and frauds roles that are manifest massive. Saying racism for a counter, that's the legal counter, that's the counter. It's identity thefts and frauds, always. That's who denies that has to hide physical delusions, has to hide criminally foreign influence premises treatments. If you say that racism caused that, all you're doing is a breaching screen, a breaching tool and a breaching weapon, preventing counters while pretending to be for counters, to worse than forsaken people with all locations, let alone those most forsaken. You have to follow mandated law for your branches of government each, because they are not alone here. And other nations are not alone there. And they do not know how to speak for themselves individually, grouped and together, because they are grouped individually and together as systems, as positive and negative treatments, as identity treatments, tactical ulterior from those. From this identity of value / value progression that is the value of sequence true and caring about it as science, not because it also cares about that came before it, the identity of the finite, the smallest thing. They care about that too, the value of the word of the finite too. So it's the sequence true, finite, active. They care about it. It's distinctly, not distinctly, simultaneously. What is progressive? What is the progressive value of what was engineered with New York City? Note they have great bricks. They don't even make bricks like that anymore. Sound infrastructure. No one growing a thing. All exceptions in exception nature and demonstration of the same thing. That was designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. More subtly, but two, Connecticut's suburban / urban cities were / are designed to cause, and suburbs are designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures that this breaching method knew people would have to respond to as fact treatment nature. And with that, they would simultaneously be blaming other things other than themselves for the real cause of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures that are sustained upon each person, organized upon each person. See, but what is evidence is recorded how the overt criminal enterprises are kept needing to hide the same predicate acts roles with evidences and with sequence shifts and with uses of identity, the ground locations, industries, the sensibilities of those people, their roles with the uses of lawyers and treatments of fact treatments leading up to in cases and people defending themselves. They're keeping out, they're parting types of experts to have ground locations crimes with courts. On a mass scale, they have readings of laws and statutes where at the last second, if you have to judge between who's telling the truth or not, where it's not always true. In other words, they're given the benefit of the doubt to the official people and or to the private people. And our people on depending on what kind of job they have their stuff. But they recorded criminally left out their roles with extortion acts and methods, identity thefts and frauds, acts and methods, and roles with that. There are many people on off Trinity College. I do not know this Eric Oliveri. I only know him in context trying to set me up with them making bombs. And with people all along Route 3 that are involved with on and off the state judicial branch offices with predicate acts on the campuses I went to, and child campuses I went to. like I never met him until high school. I had a class with him, but I met him right before that through my neighbor. Now these are police forms involved with forging names and switching names. These are police forms with the courts and prosecutors criminally involved, states attorneys, people involved with Washington D.C. with the syntax nature, the fact treatment nature of humanity, tied with his manifest on-off campuses. There are people that even walk next to you and they pretend like they're vetting or what they're doing, but they're covering lie progressions. Their roles with identity thefts and frauds, like through time with connections to locations next to the schools that are connected. And this is exploiting where and how we are a value/value progression, sickly distinctly with all locations, effectively having kept and to keep how sickly non-distinctly from being discerned. And as bad as that is, the discernment of it simultaneously reveals reliefs, natures of reliefs, and means to reliefs unfathomed. We have to admit there's a problem. We also, problem/S. And we have to refer to it as a breaching method, if you don't want to refer to it as a predicate acts delivery system method. But mandated law mandates that you have to refer to it as a predicate acts delivery system method, because I'm trying to report the actually recorded, wire crime acts and methods outside of courts, and uses of Facebook policing, and their roles in YouTube policing, all the policing of the internet. When people have problems between each other, they're using that for sequence shifts, for identity thefts, frauds, roles where the branches themselves are recorded being and having been used remotely since before electronic definitions of the word remote. They are kept standing lie progressions right back to all identity ground locations as victims, but as victim predators. What keeps that is what kept and keeps what I'm trying to show you is offensively still working with where and how they have remote uses of interbranch family members, uses of campuses with overt criminal enterprises and with private, while that mentioned simultaneously. There's a theater there. That simultaneous theater already invested our legal identities, blaming groups for the causes of predicate acts roles wrong, because they had roles with those predicate acts. They had roles with those things. They had roles with the investigators before since they were little kids, all programs with kids. They have the Boy Scouts, and they have people involved with sexual crimes reported, confessed, and demonstrated, especially if they made that up about the Cub Scouts, if they're trying to like fish or something like that, because they are involved with different natures. But you have to deal with what they were doing on and off campuses. I don't know any of the people on Two Rod Highway or Hangdog Lane. Anyone who pretended I know them, that they only know me in a context they are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, being and having been involved with investigations, and people involved with overt criminal enterprises and private criminal enterprises with predicate acts on and off campuses, connected, and with people on the child offender registry, and with federal criminals before they got caught that are involved with as the co-defendants of former director of the FBI Robert Luskin in a 2006 district court part of the case, and leading up to that, and since the defendants in that case and co-defendants and people and the plaintiffs and people tied to the neighbors of the defendants of former director of the FBI also recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with the predicate acts with people all along Route 3, involved also with natures of identity thefts and frauds, roles with evidence racketeering that's relevant to they have a whole bunch of people with Arch Pizza, I also don't know, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, involved with foreign and domestic police forms. People involved already with investigations and with cover-ups of them. In other words, with the prisons preventing people from using phones and things like that. These are prisons in our courts and our police forms that have recorded crimes with their worst patients and killers. And and child offenders since before they were caught. And it's also as people rolls with wire crimes, with the people who answer the phones for WFSB, and for the schools, for the recorded, confessed, demonstrated, also uses of principles, where in other words, and their neighbors through time, where they would perceive things while they're being told something when someone's going to show up at that time, specifically for that, as is relevant to how they have further the sensibilities of principles, where that's evidence because they're preventing me a response for the rape threats and for the confessions that were online verified, but also on and offline regarding the child offenders campus and relevant untimely deaths, and roles with them with various natures of medicines, crimes, and drug crimes, with the overt criminal enterprises and the witness protection program stewards, also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with my town and my street with the witness protection program ties they exploited to it, as their roles also further with this. These are also against elderly homes. These are against patients of hospitals. We have sick or bonded natures of organized crime and worse than war crimes involved with all parts of the systems because of how it is exploited, how that is self-value. And this is also relevant to what they are doing with the prosecutors when they were little kids, having them involved with predicate acts, identity thefts, and frauds, and stacking database illusions and acting live progressions tied to that, and sequence shift roles. Now, so these are people further involved also with the Ninth Circuit Court right next to the World Trade Center right before it. So they're keeping everyone knave, punk, and pretending other. They're preventing people calm means from defending ourselves. They use crime methods. If you try to report what is actually recorded, they'll attach everyone around you to fake conversations with you about that. You didn't even tell people about that. They pretend you talked to it about other people. Now these are doctors involved with the families also that were on the street years ago. Also involved. Ones on the street, not good people, have no idea. They're speaking with a Leahy family, with other people involved, with the extended family members of one involved with the police and courts, forcing them through time roles with them fabricating audio and video, setting up fake sides of fact treatments, sequence shifting together, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. A Ray Colillo, a Joe DeMoro, and a Mike Kerr recorded, confessed, and demonstrated a Mogman family is involved with them, with courts and with prosecutors and with overt criminal enterprises and with how they shared girls. And now these are also people involved with leaderships of the post office and people involved with a Joshua Stryker and a Joshua Julian, further involved with Facebook, with the principal child offenders campus, and with switching names on and off Trinity College, involved with others involved with the family members of the federal criminals since before they were caught. And that was before the 2006 case where they were co-defendants of former director of the FBI. Right before that, one of the co-defendants, Thaddeus Grabowski, right next to Fox Connecticut News. Those buildings next to it in the parking garage has police families and stuff like that. Through time, there's Ray Reynolds. I barely, the only context I know him in is he was influenced to pretend he knew me. I had no conversation with him. I explained that online before. So in other words, there's a Middlesex Community College that has roles with FBI and with state police, interstates, that are further involved with overt criminal enterprises, all kinds of medical racketeering, and military families also involved with these families, and uses of identity ground locations like parks, on the water. There are a whole bunch of ways it's tied to Middletown, where they have people on the water, different spots of Middletown. that is involved with child abuses, elderly abuses, evidence racketeering, medicines racketeering, drugs crimes, them hiding their life progressions from that. We have no integrity, modern nations. So we're gonna be a species identity of volume rather than blaming other things, others themselves, for the real cause of negative value nature progressions, active natures. We're gonna have mandated law followed. We're gonna have it called out, or we have fake integrity pretending it's integrity. That's simultaneously valuing things like all those impositions with the coronavirus. See, we're in that pathology of infrastructure that the breaching method with slavery forced to only be fathomed. That's not what we could afford individually grouped and together. They will tell you that. Then if they want to speak about money and wealth, let them speak then. If they want to say things are all right. You have to get the voice to the people. That's why they don't have, not because, the reason they're poor because they can't have anyone speak unless they're going to be a criminal and seditious nature of wealth. And they're all criminal and seditious distinctly. If science never spoke for Hartford, Connecticut, let alone for New York City, they won't let anyone. Science, we were told it could be aerosolized. And then they said that the president's downplaying it. They're playing punk games with impassioned. It was the passion time I was worried about. It was the middle of the pandemic. There's no one at the helm. There's no one steering the boat, and they're pretending other. They are breaching screens. Mr. Woodward, please follow mandated law. I've asked CNN. If I asked wrong, I'm sorry. I asked 50,000 ways. You guys are irreproachable. That's part of what is being exploited. You guys have forcing everyone to speak through others. Oh, but these are investigators. I know these are good people. There are all kinds of evidence racketeering acts, identity thefts, and frauds with people that are claimed good people behind it against really good people. So in other words, everyone's good people. We have to deal with what is actually recorded. When someone asks to report things, you don't pretend you don't understand them. I'm asking you to report specific acts, names forging and switching interbranch, and then pretending they don't understand people. If they don't understand, then they speak through others because of how they brought their own kids into it. They're pretending they want privacy because they start trouble and they start fake care and they bring other people's name in sickly. They have rights to do that with the investigators' investigations, but they don't have the rights because they know that they're criminally involved with that. They know that they're sick. They can't be. That's how they were all raised together. You think justice spoke for locations? You think justice spoke for those kids of any of the suburbs, let alone of Hartford, Connecticut, of New York City, let alone of New York City? You think justice spoke for them? You think order spoke for them? Fake punk narratives that have to blame it on things short. They can't afford the short words of our species with correlations, nature, simultaneously inherent active progressive means. So follow mandated law. They also attach Saudis, our side, attach Saudis to fake words and roles forced with a Scalora family that's also involved with predicate acts on my street with people who said they're extended family members. They're involved that are also involved over the last 3 months, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously with police forging and switching names with the Wethersfield Police Department and with people with the name Sullivan associated with Park Street locations and Lena's Cafe and Lena's Pizza or whatever, associated through time, involved with child campuses, with justice racketeering, with people that involved with prisons and agencies and courts, criminally involved with campuses, and CCSU with Wethersfield campuses, and with the Principal Child Defenders campus. They also said that Lance Cuddy and his family is involved. And these are people involved with forensics locations in the transition from Alca to Rico, criminally, with those locations and with the body dumping spot And people there, those are also the ones involved here with this Dillon family, and the military involved with the policing of the schools also. Criminally foreign influence delusions roles also with the predicate acts on off. Fox Connecticut News with two DeMaine brothers, and Mendez Police Intercities involved with predicate acts with Fox Connecticut News and with WFSB. If that's how they like to take. I asked them over the phone. They won't. Everyone speaks to other. They have the people who answer the phones run zone defense because they've been fabricating audio and video with cases tied to how they've been hiding live progressions on off with their roles with predicate acts on off kids' campuses. And I also don't know that woman who pretended popped up tied to science classes and stuff and tried to put me in quotes. One of the ones that tied to a Heather Hansen and a Joshua Julian involved with deans forging names and switching names, if by themselves or others, but former Director of the FBI Robert Luskin and his lawyer Robert Chevrolet. And a bunch of the federal criminals and their family members are also recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with those kids when they were kids, and with predicate acts intercities with that Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University used from off campuses criminally, and then defended where on off campuses stay criminally foreign influenced. So we have an officer or a private officer who used the name Darth Vader, who's also recorded, confessed, and demonstrated where that was his roles, where these are people, the Joshua Julian and the Joshua Stryker on Trinity, with that on-off Trinity, on-off Zion Street, involved also with overt criminal enterprises, and with people with UPS involved with shipping drugs and stuff like that with them, but then uses of that off things, especially if that was undercover. Now they have people involved with programs with strippers and things like that are police forms and stuff like that are and training them, involved with state police and things like that. Whatever they have to be close to with on the streets with other nations and stuff like that. They have collusion with them with other natures of organized crime, with the judges and with the prosecutors criminally involved with on-off CCSU and the locations all around it and through time. As the ones involved with the campuses in my town, criminally involved with them through time. Interbranch from Wethersfield, Connecticut, since founding. Pounding drums. This is where George Washington had to come to meet with the French general before the last Revolutionary Battle of the Revolutionary War. They have that worse than obfuscated and not known by you because they have words that were forced to our parents, theaters that were forced to them to entertain, used offensively to prevent our correlation by what they actually communicate to us.